you very much. Michael Wood.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Very happy to take a call on this bill, and in doing so I'd like to particularly comment on some of the changes made in Select Committee and some of the very good submissions received in respect of electric vehicles. And the focus there will be on amendments to Section 145 of the Land Transport Act and Section 37A of the Road User Charges Act. Before I get on to those, I just must say I have stuck in my mind a comment from the Minister about the potential for the refuse industry to shift to electric vehicles. And I've got to say, whenever I think of that particular industry, I think of Tony Soprano. And so I have this image of Tony Soprano and the New Jersey Mafia leading the way towards a brighter, more sustainable future for us, Mr Chair. Moving on from that, can I reflect a little bit on a couple of these changes made at Select Committee? First one's 37A of the Road User Charges Act. And by and large, these seem to be sensible changes, and they relate to giving an exemption to heavy vehicles, from road user charges. That's right. Heavy electric vehicles from road user charges. And I guess there are just a couple of things I want to comment on. The first is the change made in Select Committee, which is to 37A 1A, which I think just makes the fairly common sense but useful addition that when the Minister is making this recommendation that road user charges may be exempted from these vehicles, that Minister does need to show that they are satisfied that the purpose of that will support the uptake of those vehicles. And I suppose, just wearing my regulations review hat, I think it's really important that when we do hand these powers to ministers through legislation like this, particularly when it's a power that directly relates to the economic incentives within industry, it's effectively an impost being applied to some people and not applied to others, that we do put some onus on ministers to actually demonstrate that there is a tangible benefit that is linked to the purposes of the original Act. So I thought that was a sensible and constitutionally appropriate addition for the Select Committee to make to that. Perhaps one question for the Minister would just be what her expectation might be of the kind of evidential basis that we might expect to see from a Minister in showing that they are satisfied with that. I think sometimes we can be a bit light and airy with these things. Again, there are real impacts on an industry and on businesses. It would be good to get some satisfaction from the Minister that when these decisions are made, there's some evidence on the table to base them upon. Second thing related to 37A, sir, and the changes made in Select Committee is that we have clarified that in respect of any orders made under this part of the bill, which will then be an act, of course, that the period in which the exemption ends must be no later than the 31st of December 2025. And it will just be good to hear from the Minister why exactly we've chosen that date. I can see the purpose in having a date built into the legislation, and in 2AB we say that any orders made subsequently, the date is 5 years after the date on which the period of exemption starts. And so what's the particular reasoning behind firstly the 31st of December 2025 and latterly for that 5-year period? And I think the reason it's important to get a bit of clarity around those is that the particular kind of vehicles that we're talking about, heavy electric vehicles, are going to be costly investments for any kind of business, for the Sopranos of Mount Roskill or whoever it is to make. We're talking about $100,000 plus vehicles easily, and I think it's really important that we are able to give some certainty to those people that the period of exemption has some sort of rational basis. It hasn't just been plucked out of thin air. So if we could hear from the Minister about exactly why those dates are the ones that have been inserted at Select Committee stage into this legislation, I think that would be really helpful in terms of our consideration of the bill, sir. Moving on to the changes to the Land Transport Act 1998, and we've got some major changes made there to Section 145 of that Act, under 17A of this Act, and these relate effectively to the capacity of local authorities to who may choose to go down the route of giving electric vehicles the right to use special purpose lanes, particularly bus lanes, This goes to their ability to have, Mr Chair.
Michael Wood.
Thank you, Mr Chair. This goes to their ability to actually be able to enforce that. And of course that's pretty important, because it's all very well for this Parliament to say that something should happen, or say that local authorities should or can do something, but if they don't actually have any realistic capacity to enforce it, that's pretty pointless. And I do want to go on to and just talk a little bit about some of the submissions received shortly about possibly the utility of this whole area of the bill, that is allowing electric vehicles to use special purpose bus lanes. But in respect of the enforcement issue, we received a number of very good submissions. I thought just particularly it's worth taking a moment to have a look at the Ministry of Transport submission in respect of what the implications might be for electric vehicles using special vehicle lanes. And what they identify in their submissions is that there are a number of additional steps that are going to need to be gone through here. And of course, we're talking about NZTA here. And if I think about Auckland, for example, this means the bus lanes not on arterial roads like Dominion Road, but it means the bus lanes potentially on such as the Northern Expressway, or potentially, if we ever get it, and let's pray that we do, a bus lane on the Northern Busway. So actually the kind of busways that we're talking about, that NZTA is talking about here in their submissions, are amongst the most important ones to get this right on, because they're the ones that have huge capacity. So now more than half of the vehicles crossing the Harbour Bridge come across on the Northern Busway, so we've got to get this stuff right. And what they identify, there was a question put by the Select Committee here about the cost of installing cameras for enforcement of NZTA-controlled special vehicle lanes. And they identify the costs involved are automatic enforcement solution costs include cameras, infrastructure, communications, applications, installation, staffing and back office systems. So we're talking about a pretty significant outlay. And I do have a bit of a concern here, sir, that in putting these provisions in here, we're not necessarily thinking through the next step. Not only is it desirable, but if it is desirable, is it even particularly practical for the road controlling authorities, be it NZTA or the local authorities, to go down this track? The other question I did have for the Minister, and I'm hoping it's just an area I'm not too familiar with and she can answer it fairly simply, relates to section 17R, which has been inserted by the Select Committee. And in that text, they talk about, let me just read it out, prescribing subject to the marking of lanes on the roadway, that on any road, any traffic lane may be used or any turning movement may be made only by vehicles of specified classes or vehicles carrying specified classes of loads of no fewer than a specified number of occupants. And what I just want to confirm with the Minister and the Chair is that the purpose of this bill is to ensure that electric vehicles can potentially gain access if a local authority chooses to go down that road. But by defining it as specified classes, does that open it up potentially further for a local authority to make other exemptions? So if we get some clarity from the Minister around that, that would be very helpful. Thank you. And just in coming to the end of my comments in this area, Mr Chair, I do just want to reflect on this whole area of the bill. It's probably the most contentious one. The opposition isn't opposing the bill on the basis of this, and that's probably because we're making it optional for local authorities rather than compulsory. I suspect there would be some far firmer speeches and a greater degree of opposition if we had made these provisions compulsory. But we do wonder about the utility of them, Mr Chair. We received some very, very good submissions. One here from the Bus and Coach Association, which notes that when Norway did go down the route of doing this, and that's Norway's put up as an example of why we should allow electric vehicles into bus lanes, it made congestion worse. It made congestion worse. Probably the very best submission of all came from the Auckland Regional Public Health Service. They also noted that point, and they noted that in every single case that they have looked at, and they looked at the case of Tamaki Drive, where Auckland City Council was pressured to make it a T2 or T3 lane, every single time you go down this track of allowing additional vehicles into bus lanes, no matter what the other public policy objectives are, you make congestion worse, not only for people in the bus lanes, but for everyone else. And so you actually defeat the fundamental purpose of those bus lanes. And of course those bus lanes not only reduce congestion, but they make for a healthier and cleaner city as well. as well, sir. I don't think many local authorities are going to take up that option for this reason. So we support this bill, but it would be good to hear some answers from the Minister on those questions.
I call Lewis Wall.
Tēnā koe, Mr Chair.